As on the top of the agenda, I just need to remind everybody, well not remind, tell them maybe for the first time, but we will be, as a council, recording the session. You can see the microphone, which is very clear. That's under the rules that now exist, that anyone is entitled to record the session. Some people have done it in the past, I believe, and they're entitled to do it today, as indeed is the council. Okay, apologies and reasons for absence.
Borough Councillor Mick Burgess has a JTB meeting. He sends his happy Christmases to everybody. And our PCSO is at Carnardington, I think it is first, and hopes to come on to us afterwards.
Good. Declaration of members of any interest, pecuniary or other than pecuniary, in accordance with Council Code of Conduct and its guide to the declaration of councillors' interests and related matters. I shall record an other than pecuniary in connection with item 11, which is the Sports and Social Club, as I am a member of that club.
Likewise.
Any other declarations?
Not
Incidentally, that being other than pecuniary, I don't have to remove myself.
No.
No one else? Okay. So we don't have any applications put to the meeting for dispensations, and a reminder that the meeting is being recorded, I've already mentioned. So we'll now adjourn the formal council meeting for the public session. We do have some planning applications in front of us, and I think one of our members of the public is here in that connection, but I don't think the applicant is here. In fact, the applicant said to you that he couldn't come. Is that right?
Which one are we talking about?
The one on the boundary at Stone, but not quite on the boundary.
Yes.
In fact, it is fully in Wittersham, I'm told. It's the neighbour who's here that's on the boundary.
Right, okay.
Does anyone want to talk about any of the planning applications? We'll consider them when we get to our formal meeting. But does anyone want to talk about any of the planning applications? We've got Mains Farmhouse, which is the one on the boundary between us and Stone. We've got the land adjoining the beaches in Blackwall Road, and we've got the application to remove a condition on the Lordings. No one to say anything? Oh yes, please.
I will just support the application for Mains Farmhouse. I am the owner of Mains, which is the house on the boundary.
Right.
And Mains Farmhouse is one house nearer to Wittersham,
Yep.
our immediate neighbour. And just to record that my wife and myself have absolutely no objection whatsoever to this application. We think it will actually improve their house, and we wish them all the best with it.
Is the extension on your side or the other side, or is it indeed not on either side because it's out backwards?
No, one of the extensions is on our side towards us, but it's basically raising the height of a single story existing living room into a bedroom above, and there will be no windows facing our property on that wall. We've been sent the plans to look at by our neighbours.
Fine.
And the extension on the other side will provide a decent sized kitchen breakfast room for them, which I think the house deserves.
Right.
It will balance the house.
Right. Okay, that's very helpful to us. Thank you very much. Okay, who else wants to talk? That's the planning. The next thing I think is to have the community warden's report, so that the community warden can then decide whether or when to go.
Thank you. Okay, so I've been very busy, not necessarily just in Wittersham. Obviously I've got quite a large area to cover. I did have an incident about a month or so ago with a lady from Wittersham who actually fell over in Tenterden and required first aid until the ambulance came. So I was with her for about 3/4 of an hour dealing with first aid, where she'd fractured her cheek and fallen over in the street. Actually in the village I've done a lot of community engagement and given out lots of advice and a lot of signposting work as well, just people who need information about how to access certain information as well. I've been made aware of a theft from building other than a dwelling. so whether that's a shed or a garage. See if the police can give more information on that. And I think there was also an incident at the sports pavilion as well that you're probably aware of. I've also been talking to the school about doing another safety talk in the new year as well, and more signposting with dementia sufferers as well to the facilities that are available, and also with the Dementia Memory Cafe in Tenterden, and the opportunities for businesses to have dementia awareness training as well, just to be able to understand how dementia sufferers see or have difficulties in shop environments and other aspects as well. So that's a lot of the things that I've been doing. If anyone's got any issues or anything they'd like to help with, I've also got information to do with doing the litter pick as well, which I've passed on. Obviously, once you've decided on a date for that, I'd be quite happy to be involved with that as well.
I didn't quite pick up when you said that the lady had fallen over in the street and you had to help her. Was that in Wittersham, did you say?
No, it was in Tenterden.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
But she lives in Wittersham.
I know we've had 1 or 2 falls in Wittersham, but I didn't realise, I wasn't sure whether it was bad enough to need your intervention or not. Okay.
I think with first aid incidences like that, it just it's.
You happen to be there.
I happen to be there at the
Sure.
time and
Understand.
And can help deal with it.
Sure. Understand.
Joe, can I just ask? You mentioned about an incident at the sports pavilion. I'm not aware of anything. So.
I'm hoping I'm not mixing it up with the sports pavilion in one of my other villages.
No, there has been.
No, you
there was a break-in and a robbery.
Yes.
I did forward information. I did forward the information I had on it.
I think it was cards and cash and spirits. So,
It was a theft.
Just on that point, that you did forward it, but the paucity of information, which is not down to you, you're just forwarding it, is on the ringmaster is exacerbated by the fact that we haven't got any police presence here, and
But he's hoping to come.
He's hoping to come. Well, when he comes, we'll maybe ask him a question just in case he doesn't come. The other burglary was from the property next door to mine.
right.
It was reported as a blue compressor stolen. Well, it was a heck of a lot more than that.
Okay.
The garage was broken into, 4 JCBs and big earth moving equipment on the property. All those were broken into, their batteries were taken, which were pretty new. This is Bernard Brown's nephew who had all his equipment stolen, was on site. They also removed the steering wheel from the ride-on mower because they wanted to come back. There's 2 incidents there, and it's caused a huge amount of loss to the extent that the garage, because he feels it's just so vulnerable there, he's actually destroyed the garage, knocked it down, replaced it with a shipping container because he's got a lot of valuable equipment. But I just get the sense that there is considerably more crime than there was a year or so ago. We've had all sorts of incidents, some fairly petty reported breakages, discharge of air rifles, shooting of phone boxes and breaking of those. There's a heck of a lot there. And I just feel that the complete lack of any police presence, I know it's not going to stop it completely, but they are just completely absent. There's absolutely nothing at the moment, and we've been assured this is going to change. We've been assured that the Police Parish Forum is going to be resurrected. We get that every 6 months and nothing happens, and I just think we need to record the fact that we're pretty much the forgotten outpost. I understand that the PCSOs don't have a vehicle each, so whether our guy can get here tonight probably depends on whether he's got access to 4 wheels. If not, then
He does. Yes, it's more chance because he drives a van.
He drives
So
a van.
one
He
of
doesn't have
the
to share it
one
or-
of the few that does.
Right,
So
okay. Well, the
there's more
previous one
chance of
didn't have
him.
any van.
You're right.
So we wait with bated breath whether he'll appear tonight. But I think it's a real issue, and a number of people have expressed that, not just the break-ins and the robberies, but
Yeah, of course. I mean,
the
I only get
vandalism.
minimal information on
Of course,
these
and
things.
that's another
So,
really poor part of the system, that you as a community warden is just pretty much left out of the loop on this, as we are. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, the 2 of us have met the PCSO when he came to the community market, which obviously you wouldn't have been able to about a month ago. And we're hopefully going to see him later tonight. But that's why we know that he drives a van. I raised the issue of vehicles with him, and he said because he's one of the few that's authorised to drive a van, and they have quite a number of vans because they have to have them for when there's something kicks off, as they call it. then he can usually get a vehicle when other people can't. And we, in fact, when he came to see us, he came in a van, a large van. Okay, but without any people in the back. Who else would like to speak in the public? Incidentally, let me just, before I go to that, let me say that if the PCSO turns up as we hope he will, then I'll adjourn the meeting again so that he can give us whatever report he wants to, which I'm able to do in those circumstances, I think. But who else would like to speak now? Miriam.
Okay, I'd like to speak to agenda item 4.1, the Village Green signage update. It would be useful to know during the public session what update there is. I can obviously give the Parish Council an update on where I am with that.
Good.
Which the Open Spaces Society has been in touch with me and have recommended a firm in Derbyshire. It's not local, but these are experts in these kind of signs, and they do some absolutely beautiful signs, and we are looking for a quality sign. It's Leander Architecture, so I'm giving them the details of the sort of thing that we are looking at. So we just really need to know before we commission any sign that Ashford Borough Council are happy for the sign to go on their land, and there's not going to be an issue because it's going to be pretty awkward if we spend £3,000 on the sign. Fine, but we can't get it up. So you know, if you could give me an update now, because obviously when you discuss it in your meeting, I can't come in and comment on things.
That's
so
fine.
It would be useful if you could do that now, please.
Of course.
Actually, it is only an update, Miriam, because there's nothing really to discuss, because I'm waiting on Ashford. I contacted KCC, went straight to there. Melanie McNair, yes, you can't cross her before. She came back to say, I sent her both photos, remember the ones I showed you last time? Although the County Council is the registered authority responsible for dealing with applications to register new village greens, we have no remit in terms of the management and enforcement of registered areas, which normally falls to the parish or district council. Therefore, no power to authorise any new structures or other features. However, I have attached a copy of DEFRA's guidance, which you may find of use. From what you have described below, it doesn't sound as though what you are proposing would be objectionable, particularly as it is intended to enhance enjoyment of the village green and is unlikely to interfere with its recreational use. And I've copied those words to Ashford, so that Ashford know that. So I'm just waiting on Ashford. And as soon as I know, I'll
Contacted at Ashford?
Well, Sue Smith is the legal.
You haven't contacted planning?
No, I've gone straight to legal, and then if she's okays it, then we'll go to planning. But I thought if legal say no, then there's no point in going any further at this stage.
Matter for legal. I think the legal side of it is KCC. It's the planning side we're now looking at, and Ashford Borough Council who own the land really. So it's a matter of whether they're happy for that on their land, and whether it would need planning permission. We're trying to keep it within the dimensions that you gave me that doesn't need planning permission. But as I say, I mean, we really want to take this forward. So if we could just have a yes in principle from Ashford, then I can get on with commissioning this sign.
Right, I'll see if I can chase that up.
So if we can chase that up, and if you could then let me know.
Yeah, we'll do.
In principle, the parish council has agreed the sign will be a good thing. So now it's just all this red tape, isn't it? Getting things done, and you know, it just goes on and on and on. So if we could.
Yes, because that's why I've actually put it in matters arising, because the way I see it, Parish Council has said okay, so really it's between what I can find out and you. That's the way.
I mean, we just need the okay from Ashford. Now, going back very many years, and Councillor Burgess, unfortunately, is not here tonight, he had actually got approval from Ashford for a sign. I think that's going back to about 1997 or something. So they have given sign permission, but that was absolutely years ago. So in principle, there shouldn't be a problem. But maybe if you contacted Councillor Burgess and asked him to push for this for us.
Okay, we'll do.
Then we might get that sign up, which would be really nice, I think.
I think the only thing to say to what Miriam's just mentioned is that, of course, KCC have said no power and no grounds to object either way. Ashford, of course, have got to give either planning approval or planning exemption, and we know where the boundary is, or we believe we do. But the other side of it is, of course, they're the landowner, and therefore they must make sure they don't transgress the rules on village greens, which is, you know, appertaining to recreation and all the stuff that you're very familiar with. And of course it doesn't, but on the other hand, we're trying to do it in a space that the clerks picked out where it doesn't impede. And so long as they regard it as, you know, kind of not worth arguing about, that's fine. But we must make sure that they do give all the approvals rather than get half of them and then someone else in Ashford says you can't do it, because that would be deeply embarrassing. So that's all we're after, is getting a proper, clear approval so that you know that you're all right.
I mean, I think, as I suggested, the route might be via our borough councillor.
Yeah, if he knows more, if he knows more, that will be helpful, and that was a useful tip. That was a useful tip.
The departments, okay. So
the lawyers will probably go their own way eventually, but hopefully in our direction.
I'm obviously not going to commission the sign.
No, you mustn't.
You can get the design and everything and the price, but and just to confirm that the parish council are happy if the donation is made to them for the invoice to be to them, so we wouldn't need to pay back on the sign.
It becomes our property then.
Was the figure of £3,000?
Sorry?
Did you say £3,000?
No, I said that's the budget we've got.
Oh, right, sorry.
Right. They haven't given us a price yet, but we've got a budget of that. I mean, a lot of them are a lot more expensive than that. Sure. You would be quite surprised because they're custom-made signs. They're very expensive.
Sure.
But we want something that's going to be there in 100 years' time, don't we? Really,
sure.
Still looking good, rather than, you know, a tatty bit of wood with a bit of sign writing on it. So that's the aim. But yeah,
you did just respond to the clerk saying if we take the VAT off it, we have to take ownership.
That's a fair point.
That's the rule.
You wouldn't own it, would you? Because it's not your land. So
no, so I can't claim back.
There might be a problem there. So
can't claim.
No,
can't. Okay, so that doesn't come into it.
Yeah, well, we'll look into that. But I think you're probably right.
Yeah, and I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's why when we had the benches, remember, they became the parish council's responsibility.
I suppose the other way to do it is to ask Ashford Borough Council if they're happy for us to do that, to give them a donation. And
It's worth asking.
Yeah, I mean, it would save 20%.
If it saves £600, it's important to you, and it's probably beyond their notice, below their notice.
That could buy a bench as well, couldn't it?
Good point.
Really,
well, if
but,
okay,
well, we need to work around that one.
Okay.
Perhaps know somebody who might have an idea on that.
All right, thank you.
Right, okay, obviously the other item which we've sort of addressed a little bit in advance is this item 11, to consider and, if agreed, endorse the council's position on the Sports and Social Club and its future. I was alerted to this item. Usually I do look at the council's agenda, but I've been pretty preoccupied with the Sports and Social Club in recent weeks to find that this on the council's agenda. I find it surprising that they put something like this on the agenda when they haven't consulted those people who are actually involved in the sports club. I take the social club out of it at the moment because it's not a legal entity in any shape or form. So, I mean, I don't know why it's on in that shape because it doesn't exist. So I find it quite surprising that you put that on there. I don't know what your justification is for believing that something like that exists. Perhaps that could be explained because as far as I'm concerned there is no legal entity, Wittersham, the Sports and Social Club. But you know, please explain that. So that's my first question, and you know, obviously what I said about, you know, why you're putting this on an agenda when you haven't consulted the people who are affected by this, that you're trying to get a position when you actually don't know the facts. You don't have any facts before you. I understand from the clerk that there has been circulated by the chairman a document which we're not allowed to see. Well, I find that amazing, that a document is circulated but people can't see it. Normally the situation is, if there's discussions of agenda items, if you go to Ashford, all the papers are published, you can see exactly what's going to be under discussion, and so members of the public can make informed comments in the public session. We can't make informed comments at all because we have got no idea what you are going to discuss in that closed session. So those of us who have dedicated many years of our life to sport in this village are going to have to listen to you discussing the future of our sports field, and we're not going to be able to say a word because we don't know what is before this parish council. I'd like an explanation as how you think that is a fair and equitable approach to the future of our sports field.
Can I just say, Miriam, at this point, I did explain earlier, we're not talking about the future of the sports club.
Well, then why put that down as an agenda item and its future?
What we're doing, Miriam, is we're responding in more thoughtful time to the questions and criticisms that you and Mary Walton raised. I did try to explain this to Mary Walton earlier. We're responding to the questions and criticisms that you raised in the public session a month ago. You asked us then, you will hear some of this when we get to the council meeting, the formal session, but you asked us then how it was that, as you reported, I know no more than what you told us, as you reported, the chairman of the Sports and Social Club, I use that title loosely, had represented to Ashford,
That's
I
incorrect.
gather.
Sorry, can I just stop you there because that's incorrect? It was not the chairman.
I thought you said the chairman last month.
It was the secretary. It was the secretary, and it's 100%. I said the secretary.
Well, if you'd said the secretary, if you'd said the
meeting with Ashford Borough Council licensing department, and I take exception to Councillor Venning. Look as if I'm not telling the truth.
Well, yeah,
I had a meeting with. Well, it'd be good now that we're having things recorded because we will know exactly what's been said. I had a meeting with Ashford Borough Council licensing department with the secretary of the sports club, Adrian Delaney.
Okay. If I remembered wrongly, then my apologies. It doesn't
but
really.
But you're having backup from another member of the
If I got it wrong, it doesn't matter. The point is, then let us pull back. Let's try and make some progress, because you asked a question, you asked for an explanation, and I'm trying to give you an explanation, and we've gone down a rabbit hole. The chairman, secretary, whoever, I thought it was the chairman. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. Either way, I translated it in my mind to Stuart Hibbert rather than Adrian Delaney, but whatever. It was represented to us last meeting by yourself that you'd heard this thing being put to Ashford, that we were fully in support, and as you pointed out, we couldn't be fully in support because we hadn't had a resolution here to say that. That's technically and legally utterly correct. I did say at the time that I was supportive of it, but obviously I couldn't claim the council to be, and that was backed up by some other councillors. However, it's a big however, when I went away and reflected on that meeting, as I do, and what had happened, I thought that, having said that, Mrs. Walton said that I'd said that we had no position on the sports club. I don't know if they were the words I use now or not. It was in the public session. It wasn't minuted, not in detail anyway. But it was open to misinterpretation that I had said, if I had, that we had no position or no this or no that, because I thought we do in fact have a position on the sports club, sports and social club, whatever. And I therefore have written a note today, a few weeks ago, but it'll be up on the agenda for councillors today, laying out what I think the established position of the council is. I'm not doing anything more than drawing together the strands of what the council has already done, agreed, or whatever, up to this point, because I wanted to be able to say, that is where we stand. That is clear, it is unequivocal. It is not that we have no position on the sports club. It is not that we're in fully supportive of the sports club, but we simply have a series of strands of things that have come along. And I started explaining them to Mrs. Walton earlier, but she said, well, what was I doing about the trust? The answer was nothing. I mean, the trust is not an issue there, and she felt that was extraordinary. Now, you have been asking for this note. I did ask the clerk earlier, I don't believe that it is normal practice for us or anyone else to give out all our papers in advance. I believe, until someone can show me that I've got this wrong, if they can, I believe that our job as the council is to conduct our council meetings, unless we go into closed session, it's to conduct them in public. And we do. That's transparency. You're entitled to listen to all of it, unless we go into closed session. What we do not do is we do not conduct the council with the public. You see the agenda, you see the minutes, you see the accounts, you see any policy statements we put on our website, you see anything on the publication scheme, but that does not mean that everything that we produce actually goes out to the public in advance, so that if we wanted to consult, we would consult. I'm not consulting on this, I'm simply reporting what I think the position is to councillors and councillors and councillors will respond.
This is a public session. Can we just remind you of that? Because
Please.
we're actually
No, it is.
listening to you.
No, I just wanted to finish my sentence. Now it's over to you.
But at the end of the day, we didn't ask for a position on the sports club. That was not what was asked for. What was asked about was what you thought about what is happening at the sports club, which is rather different to a position on the sports club. That's a completely different question.
Well, you'll see.
Never mind, we'll see. At the end of the day, what I'm saying to you is that that is not the question that was asked. Nobody asked you what your position was on the sports club. You were asked about a specific goings on at the sports club, which were believed to be in breach of the charitable trust. That's what you were asked about. You were not asked about a position on the sports club. So I think that needs to be absolutely clarified. In the interest of transparency, if you have a document, and the clerk admits there is a document, and she does have one, so I am now formally asking you, and I'm not asking it under the freedom of information, I'm going to ask it because I can do it verbally by this one. I'm going to ask under the environmental information regulations for a copy of that document. Those say that if you have that document, you have to give me it as soon as you are able. I guess the councillors have it in front of them. So you could give me that now if you so choose. Right? So if you want to refuse it to me, you have to say why it is in the public interest that you are going to refuse me that document.
As far as I can see, it doesn't fall under the EIR.
Oh yes, it does.
If it does, then that will be something to be worried about later. But as far as I can see, it doesn't apply within EIR. What I did agree through the clerk when you were pushing her earlier is that I shall read the document out when we get to this public session, or when we get to the council session. I am not attempting to be other than transparent, but I am attempting to continue the council's conduct of its business, and that's what we will do. What I had intended to do before this great squabble blew up, and that's what I believe it is, was that after the council, if they decided to, had supported the paper that I wrote in the sense of the strands of areas where we do have a position on the Sports and Social Club, and the Charitable Trust is not one of them, that's why I haven't dealt with it, Mrs. Walson's point, then we could say, well, okay, this is now established, this is what our position is, but it's not for me to put out the position to the public. I need to see what the council thinks about it, and that's what we will do.
So you're actually saying that the charitable trust does not come into your consideration of this matter, so you will not take into account the fact that this land is designated land for sport, the subject of a charitable trust set up by Lady Mallet in 1965 for the exclusive use of sport in this village.
Then talk to the Charity Commission.
Come into your consideration.
It will if the present landowner, Mr. John Mallet, leaves it to us and dies, then obviously we will have a concern as the landowner. We're not the landowner at the moment. The Charity Commission obviously takes an interest in charities. I don't think, unless I've missed something, I don't think that's a matter for us. All I have done in this paper, as you will find out, is to lay down where I think we have a crossover with the sports club or the social club, where we have taken a position. And I did that because, having been ambushed last time in the public session, and that's your right, you can do that, with a question about whether we fully supported it or not, I may have erred, and other councillors had a discussion at the same time, in suggesting the sports club was really nothing to do with us. It is something to do with us in certain definite respects, and all I've done now is lay them down for clarity and for honesty and for transparency. And to be honest, if the two of you don't see that once we've gone through it, then I would be surprised. Mary.
Look, this isn't really a squabble. I find it quite an emotive issue because, of course, it's my family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think many of the parish councillors ever knew my grandmother. Perhaps you matched it. Oh, you probably did, Yvonne. I don't know.
No, I didn't.
You didn't. Okay. Well, she was a very decent sort of person. She leased the sports field to the Wittersham Sports Club for £1 a year, but only on the condition that it was used as a general sports ground and Wittersham Sports Club Pavilion only. That was the proviso on which she leased it. She wouldn't have leased it otherwise. It wasn't going to happen. I had a very close relationship with my grandmother and I talked to her frequently about it. It was for sport and sport alone. Okay? If Grandma were alive today, she would politely and firmly tell the drinking club to please leave the premises. The land was designated exclusively for sport, and it remains like that for the next 9 years. It really is completely irrelevant if anyone in particular thinks that the village would benefit from a recreation ground or a community pub or something else. They're perfectly welcome to give some of their own land for those particular purposes. The field Grandma leased was for sport alone. She's buried down there in the churchyard. Just because she's dead, don't try to take advantage of her. Don't go behind her back and use the field for something else.
I think it's worth just saying to the end of that, Mary, I think we're well off the subject for the council here. If you have problems with the charitable trust or with the family ownership or with this or that, it is either within your family or it's between you and the sports club. It's not a matter for the council and for our public session tonight.
Well, what is the line in this issue? The charitable trust is central to the whole thing. Now, you're telling me that the parish council, last time you said the parish council has no role. I accepted that. You asked me, you said, Mary, what do you want me to do about it? I said, I want you to be aware of it.
And we are. I read the documents.
You asked me to send you the documents.
I read all of them.
I did.
I read all of them.
You cannot look at the social club issue not within the framework and the context of the charitable trust. The charitable trust is the only framework within which anyone has access to that field. Okay?
But we're not the referees of that particular point. It's either the charitable trust or the ownership.
I think it would be much wiser to keep off the whole subject because you are not adequately informed and you are saying that the charitable trust is nothing to do with you. That can't be right.
Well, we're not the judges in that particular argument. I think that's what I'm saying.
It's not a question of judges. Nobody can go onto that field except within the terms of the charitable trust. The social club is not law.
Okay.
We have to operate within the law.
I understand the principle of what you're saying, Mary, but I think that's an argument to have elsewhere.
Or say we have no role.
Well,
either do it correctly within the terms of the charitable trust, or say this is not our role.
All right, that's your position, Mary. Let's wait until we get to the points that I did make, which don't touch the charitable trust, and to be honest, or not in any other way than indirectly, and they certainly don't directly. And to be honest, I think we're or you're endeavouring to draw the council into a part of this issue that isn't ours.
No, I'm endeavouring I agree that the council is right in saying that it has no role in this.
And this item, I think, quite rightly, as Mary points out, shouldn't actually be on this agenda.
Well,
I mean, I want to actually take councillors back to March 2016 and the minutes of the meeting then.
yeah.
And I just want to ask you, I mean, it will not, I think, well, let's have a look. Councillor Mash was here, Councillor Smith was here, Councillor Benning was here, Councillor Parkin and Councillor Green. Okay, it's towards the end, and I guess I'd probably be the only person sitting here at that point. But at the end of that, we've got a point here, items for information 3314F. The chairman informed the meeting that he had received correspondence from Mr. Mallet, Mr. John Mallet, expressing his concern that he had heard that the sports club was talking about having a social club to get more money in. This isn't a parish council matter. The first thing I want to ask is how many, and I'll ask the clerk this question as well, how many of you actually remember that statement being made?
Mr. Chairman, I feel we're getting into an examination of a past procedure which doesn't really lend itself to the work we're doing. I can't remember exactly what. You have the advantage over me that you clearly have the minutes in front of you. You used the word ambush earlier on. I think that's totally opposite. I would suggest that facilities, amenities and services for the general population of Wittersham Parish Council... Sorry, I'm now being interrupted, Mr. Chairman.
It's a public session.
Are you allowed to interrupt in the public session?
Well, at the end of the day, I've asked a question. I'd like the question answered.
And he's
trying to speak.
He's trying to answer.
Well, I don't think he is. I think he's trying to avoid answering the question because he said he's been ambushed.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, actually, I'm not going to say any further. That last comment is now recorded. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Could we please move on, Mr. Chairman?
No, because I want an answer to my question.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we know our minutes. Haven't we got some time frame? We can't have an open discussion.
We have
I'd like to now propose we invoke that.
We have gone for 40 minutes, which I think is plenty of time.
We're never going to get. There are people's planning issues.
Before I close the public session, is there anything other than the sports and social club that's on people's minds? Okay, we'll close the session.
So, so I just want it recorded, please, that you will not answer my question as to whether you remember that being said.
I remember it in broad terms. Hello. In that case, hi, it's our PCSO. So I won't close the public session. I was about to, so that he can give his report. Hello, welcome back.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Sorry about that.
Thank you for coming over after your time in Canardington. So,
wrong one.
Sorry?
I did Newington.
Oh, Newington as well.
So
you're really busy tonight. Do you want to give us a report? And then following that, I think we could ask you a couple of questions.
Yes, certainly, yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is PCSO Dan Smith. I'm the new Police Committee SWAT officer for this area. I cover quite a large area. I come in from Ham Street down to Newington. So I've got 10 parish councils in total. A bit of history of myself. I've been in the job now almost 10 years. I've always been an urban officer, so rural is quite new to me. We've had a recent reshuffle within the Ashford neighbourhood system, the way we work. We now have an urban team and a rural team. The more experienced officers have been put in the rural due to the rural not having the most consistent coverage of the police community spots. There's been quite a quick change around with people who want to go in, join up as police officers. I don't want to be a police officer, I'm quite happy in this role, so you should see a bit more stability, and I should be here for quite a long time. I have a colleague who's PCSO Chanel Howe, who's not here tonight, but we work on opposite shifts, so we cover the same area, but where I'm on late term tonight, Chanel will be on early term, so it gives a bit, maximises coverage really of the area. We have a small changeover as well where we can sort of link up with... Can I
ask you just to clarify that name of your...
Chanel Howe.
Chanel Howe.
H-O-W-E is the surname. You should see Chanel over the next sort of meetings or farmers markets or things like
Thank
that.
you.
And hopefully introduce her. I like to be quite proactive in my job. I like to do things like speed checks. I like to get out and visit communities with mobile police stations and do surgeries and things. But I've only just really took over this area about a month ago, so I'm looking to set up my mobile surgeries in the new year. So hopefully with for the next meetings, we'll see a bit more advertising around that. Speed checks I like to do. Tends to be a main bugbear for parish councils in rural, so I like to get involved with local residents who wish to come out and do speed watch campaigns, and myself I go out and do them enforceably. I spent the last few days actually doing them in and around the area. I haven't done Wittersham yet because that's tomorrow, but Wittersham, Newham and Bolton is my last activity to do tomorrow. Just really go out with the speed watch signs and sort of educate people. It's 30 around here. Try to 30, you know, there's very easy to go above it. There are schools around here and things, and you know, if I'm getting persistent ignorance from people, I'll bring out enforcement, bring some police officers out and deal with that. I like to just educate first really with the speed signs. So it's a lot of times it's perception. A lot of people don't realise they are doing 30 when they're coming from 60-mile-an-hour zones, and they're continuing their speed into them when they shouldn't be. So yeah, I'll be doing a bit of work like that. I've gotten to know this village quite well quickly because I've gone to a farmer's market, met a few local residents and things like that. So I know this area quite well. Some areas I moved in still very new to me. It's very remote. Yeah, I think that's it. Regarding a report, there's not too much to report back. There has been a few issues within the village area over the last, since I've taken over, a month, 6 weeks. A few calls regarding a few nuisance kids in the area. Not so much recently, but obviously a few weeks ago I spoke to a few people about it, and since I've spoken to a few of the kids, I hope it seems to be a bit better. I haven't had as many calls. There have been a few rural breaks to outbuildings in and around the village and neighbouring villages as well, suffering from them. So just advising local residents and people can spread the word to make sure your security is good this time of year with locks and lighting especially because they don't like to be lit up, and just be mindful where you live with animals and things like that on show. And but yeah, that seems to be a small problem in the area at the moment. Apart from that, speeding probably tomorrow when I find out that there's a lot of people speeding. But yeah, apart from that, there's nothing more to report.
You will. Thank you.
No question.
Thank you. Can I ask you straight away, you're presumably aware of the robberies that we've had, but not robberies, sorry, they're thefts, of the from the sports club and from a house down in Peening Quarter.
Yes, yeah. I say I'll visit my victims of crime. I have spoken to the sports club regarding that, and I say they are targeting. It's not so much an outbuilding, but again, it's an unoccupied building because they know there's people not there. Sure. But I'm not saying we're getting house breaks where you know, people are in there asleep. That's not happening. Right. Okay. It's happening to outbuildings and things because it's a different type of criminal that does that, and they're looking for vulnerable premises. So it's just again checking the security levels. I'm always available to give security advice. Come around and visit people if they think, you know, can I have a bit of advice on lighting, locks, maybe alarms and things like that. I'm more than happy to do that. More than happy for my email address to be given out on any sort of parish minutes and things, because I'm readily contactable by that.
And your email address is?
It's 56800.
56800.
At Kent. .pnn.
PSN.
PNN.
Sorry.
PNN.
PNN.
Oh, November.
Right.
.police. .uk. And
56800 at kent.pnn for policenationalnetwork.police.uk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Basically, we've got these new tablet devices which are very good.
Phablets.
Phablets, exactly that. Yeah. And
I heard from your PCC at the.
is that what he referred to as a phablet?
He said that they're saving you an hour a day.
Yeah, they're somewhere in my pocket. It is this giant device. I've got big pockets. It's right here, and it's telling me how much.
And you haven't lost it yet, so it's good.
It's that clever, and it is fragile, so it does try and stay.
So you don't sit on it.
And but yeah, where I can get good signal, which around here I can do, funnily enough, it's 4G, which is brilliant.
Whoa.
And, so it must be a good network. And it saves me spending time back in the office. So
Indeed,
I
brilliant.
can fill my paperwork out here.
Okay.
I can park up to 20 minutes, do my paperwork, be visible, and that's what helps a lot.
Excellent.
In rural.
Good. So,
just one quick question. Is it Ringmaster? Is that what it's called?
I'm
you sent
not
out? Is that from? Is it Ringmaster? Have I got that right?
Mine came.
The alert, the incident alert that we get on the end of.
It was Neighbourhood Watch. Neighbourhood Watch. Yes.
Okay. Do you have any input into that? Do you see what goes on there at all?
Yeah, our Neighbourhood Watch coordinator works out of Ashford.
Okay.
And he will basically send out relevant stuff from that to the on-ring watch. I don't know a great deal about the system.
Okay.
We've just got a new Neighbourhood Watch coordinator who's actually invited us to go down and understand it all. So that's probably what's going to come up.
Because you might be worth making a gap to him or her. There's a bit of a sorry to make a point of the gap. I mean, it came out so that there's one liner. A blue compressor was stolen. This is the Black Barn Farm.
Okay.
Well, it's considerably more than that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I just think there's a bit of a gap at the moment between because that's the information we're getting from that source.
Yeah.
And you know, it's either going to be complete or not. It'd be good if it's complete.
Yeah, definitely.
If you can make that point.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Thank you.
It's good to give as much information as you can because obviously it doesn't. And it's a bit vague, isn't it? A blue compressor.
Yeah. Okay. But that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dan? Yes, Roger.
Right. May I say, Mr. Chairman, we met a couple of weeks ago, and I really do like what I hear. I think it's very good news for everybody. I'd just like to ask if I heard you correctly, Peter. I can.
Dan.
I wrote it down. I said Dan. Never mind. You talked about surgery.
Yes.
How are you going to advertise those?
I'll be advertising them on. We don't advertise them on the website anymore. It used to be the way we do it, but now it'll be just by posters, and hopefully I can get into local newsletters. And if it's possible, maybe parish minutes.
Well, this is what I'm worried about because advertising in this village is not easy.
No.
You say the website.
Yeah.
The website being.
Sorry. We used to advertise on the police website, but we don't advertise on the website anymore. But I know Wittersham does have a website, doesn't it?
Yes.
And maybe we can look at doing that on there. But it'll be in the new year. What I'm going to look around times, dates, and I'm going to try and spend an hour in the village and move on to the next village for an hour, that village for an hour, work out times. So summer it'll be later in evenings, but obviously I'm not going to come here at 8 o'clock at night. But 8 o'clock in the night in summer is prime time, 7, 8. And so it'll obviously.
But to get into our parish orbit, you need to be about 6 weeks in advance.
Yeah,
and that's otherwise we don't know.
Yeah.
So I just make the point that it's not lost.
We can get items into the parish newsletter,
yes.
which does us and Stone, but it's the 15th of the month for the month following. So if you wanted to come in April, you've got to have it set up by the 15th of March.
Yeah, that's not. But I mean, I've planned my parish council. I've got a good database now for my parish council, which I'll be looking to do the same for the surgeries as well on there. And I spend a lot of my time, you'll see, maybe outside the schools as well, because it's great sort of interaction for the village. And so I'll be there a lot. Most times you'll see me there. And,
okay.
But I am mobile, and I do like to drive the bigger vehicles because they're a bigger presence. So it's normally a van or something. It's normally a vehicle.
The other thing is you came to us here on a Tuesday morning market. That happens every Tuesday.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's always the opportunity for putting notices on the tables, which won't get to everyone by any means,
yeah.
But unlike the magazine, but at least it'll pick up a seeded number.
Yeah. And I could even link it around sort of after the market times and things, because I know the market's quite well.
Market's good opportunity.
And it's great opportunity. I'll be in the room to have a chat to everyone. It's sort of not an official surgery, but I'm here to.
Sure. That's good.
I think it's two every 5 weeks. So it falls on 20 weeks. And the same with the Rolvenden one.
Excellent. Okay.
Do you get the chance to go into the schools?
I do, yeah. It's another thing I like getting involved with because you get a lot of information from schools and it's a high footfall area. So I will be going into the schools. I have gone into Wittersham School a long time ago, but I haven't got around to it since I've come up to the area yet. But from the new year, we're progressing then with all the schools. And,
Anything else for Dan? No? Any other points? I was just about to close it as Dan walked in. No?
Well, just recorded that my question wasn't answered.
Yeah, I understand. Dan, feel free to help yourself to the mince pies and crisps and the...
I'll make my way.
I know you can't have any alcohol, but there'll be orange and apple juice.
I think I might be in trouble for that.
Yeah.
I say
But feel free. And stay here as long as you want to, or go when you want to.
I finish at 8, so
Thank you very much for making the effort to come.
Thank you.
Much obliged. Thank you. And to you. Right, bye-bye.
Have you got your minutes with you? Excellent, because I haven't brought the minute book. So I'll need to use yours.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, okay, so I'll close the public session. I acknowledge the point that Mrs. Lewis raised. So to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of November 2016. On the first page, I only noticed that there was an absent apostrophe in 3445.
And the minute numbers missing under 3438. You've got minute number, but no number.
Oh.
Oh.
I think it's 3456B, I believe.
Oh, that's odd, because I thought I put that in. I remember doing that.
Okay, that's just to remind me. So the next page, that was page 690, page 691, yes, I print it slightly differently. Page 691, nothing. 692. And 693, the closed session. Can I sign those minutes as correct? Apart from the apostrophe that I'd already put in.
I have to do that. I haven't got my pen. George, may I borrow your pen, please?
If it's in red, then that's because they're wrong.
No pen.
I know. Boy,
Oh, she came with the wine.
Oh, well, true.
Everything else I brought,
Things.
trips to the car. Thank you, Jeremy.
I can do a clean copy another time.
Okay, get that back. Get stolen.
Would I?
Matters rising. See Clark's report. Village Green signage update. We've already heard some useful comments from Miriam during the...
Yes, that's all session. I got on that.
So, can we take it then as reported that KCC have said not really one for them, and Ashford have got it sitting in their in-tray?
And I'm chasing it.
And it's being chased, and
I'm going to ask Mick Burgess.
From Miriam, who's the intermediary for the kind donation from Mavis King, that they are keen to get on with it, and she's talking to Open Spaces Society about where they can get a flash sign. Is that right? Yeah. KCC Highways and Transport Survey completed with response from KCC. That was where you got a rather nice reply.
Yes, it's the one that Paul, remember you passed it over. Well, it seemed sense to do the whole thing rather than do my bit and then... So I answered it quite truthfully on whether we were satisfied, dissatisfied on service we receive, because I'm not getting any response now from the drainage engineer, Kevin Gore. And regarding the overall service, do you have any ideas on how we can improve? Emails to be answered promptly, please. I was satisfied on some of the bits, but then dissatisfied on state of pavements. And also on the state of the roads. I asked for how we thought we could improve them, so I said roadside ditches need to be kept clear so that rainwater can run off the road into them. At the moment, the rainwater runs down the edge of the road, causing the edges to break up. Storm gullies need to be emptied regularly, and any pipework cleared for the same reason. All that sort of thing right the way through. And I sent it, emailed it, did it online, emailed it straight to the chap that you were supposed to, who is Ian Norman. And I did apologise for being negative, but drainage is a serious problem. But I did say that when it comes to safety issues, when reported, they're dealt with very well, which they have been. He came back to say absolutely no trouble at all about regarding giving us any negative feedback. We'd rather you be open and honest and report things as you see them, so that any issues are highlighted to us. So
quite unusual to get a response to a consultation. Thank you. Community litter pick update. That was David and George, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the dates that we set aside, the 11th of March, which is a Saturday. My plan is to also repeat again on the 9th of September. I'm in contact with a company called Street Scene, who are the people that ABC are recommended. They will provide us with pickers, with gloves, with high visibility jackets. What I'm also asking for is, can they supply us with any signs to warn motorists? Because when we're on the edge of the village, actually we want vehicles to slow down. If we collect the rubbish in one place, from what I understand, they will also come and collect it for us as well. So I'm planning to go into the Outlook in January, or go to January, February's issue, and also advertise in the Tuesday market. I think we're probably going to need about 3 hours worth of activity. I'm hoping we'll get about 20 or 30 people from the village, and obviously all parish councillors. And then, yeah, we should be able to get the job done.
Excellent.
Like Dan, his big Dan.
Yeah, I know Dan. Sleuthing Dan. I will speak to him. Joe Voss is also going to come back and help us with it as well. So.
Good. Any comments, questions? Sounds good. So date to go in the diary.
The 11th of March, 11 till 2.
You've organised for rain, have you?
And September the 9th.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to cross it if it's really torrential rain or snow, or we'll have to cross the bridge, right?
Or the rugby's on or something.
I've done it, so I know.
What sort of time?
The rugby will have finished.
11 till 2.
Not dark.
Okay, so it's over by then. Right.
Yeah.
Any comments, questions? No. Okay, thank you very, very much for that. I'm glad to, I think it's a great idea. I may not think it's a great idea on the day, but I think it's a great idea, and yeah, we do really need to get around, and the aim presumably is to try and cover everywhere in the 30 limit, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Or the 40 limit as it is in Wittersham. Okay. So we go on to planning applications. Yeah. Previously circulated. Sorry, what
you said 40 limits.
I was making a joke.
That
was a joke.
You've forgotten about Dan's commitment. It's going to be 20 limit.
Don't go out tomorrow. So planning applications as circulated. The first one is Mains Farmhouse that we heard during the public session about. It's a single story extension to the rear and a first floor extension to the side over the existing new first floor side window, over existing with a new first floor side window. Who'd like to start off?
Only to say that if the neighbours are happy and supporting it, I'll happy to do the same.
It's really nice to have a neighbour come out in support of an application as well.
Yeah, I looked at the plans, but absolutely fine.
I was happy with that. So we can support that.
Can I just say before you all start?
Please. Feel free.
I've had an email from the applicant saying that he believes that the extension above the single-storey lounge will balance the house visually, thus enhancing its appearance. And he asked for any comments, which I did ask you for. And I'd also had from the clerks at Primrose Cottage, they weren't objecting either.
Okay.
Good. So we're supportive. Do we need to make any comments in line with the suggestions we had before from Miriam that we should put a bit more in than just, yes, no and sideways? Do we have anything else to say?
I think
we can say that the neighbours are supportive, but they can put that on the portal for themselves, of course. Yeah. Okay.
There were lots of neighbours consulted on this one, and I heard from two.
Right. Heard supportive comments from two neighbours, and the parish council are happy to support it. Okay. Good.
I presume Stoneware consulted on that.
I understand they were. It did say that they were.
Okay, thank you. The next one is the land adjoining the beaches, Blackwall Road, clearance of 3 redundant outbuildings and the erection of a 3-bedroom dwelling and detached garage. The word garage missing. Oh no, it's over the page, just right, in my case. Now, before we just discuss that, you want to start?
Well,
Yes.
just to say the Leslie and Andy Duncan from Ham Green Barn is the only one I've heard from. And they say, we have studied the plans online and have come to the conclusion that the house would be, should planning permission be granted, a fine building, would have a well laid out garden. It would be an asset and credit to the community and a very great improvement over the present, pretty much derelict condition of the land. We have no concerns whatsoever with the deposited plans and we trust that permission will be granted.
Okay. I think that just before we get into the exact one of this particular house, it's worth just having in our minds, if you agree with me, of course, worth having in our minds that we are slightly betwixt and between on housing at the moment, because we've only lately had the draft local plan came out, which we had discussed here, and we had some comments from members of the public as well, where we are under the draft plan in Wittersham, because we're in the AONB, only able to build infill. And there's a question that we discussed in the council about whether there is any space for infill or whether it needs to go outside. And as you know, I had a discussion with the guy who wrote the Ashford plan, who said, well, if there is not enough infill for the 15 years, we'll have to talk with you and look for other places, but that's for small sites, not big sites. That's still to come. Equally, we had the 27 houses turned down on Pipers. We all know we don't have to rehearse that. We all know it happened. If we think in terms of 3 houses a year, which is sort of a bit less than the maximum of 5, which was in the community-led plan, it's also the 3 houses a year, which happens to fit with the national population projection of the Office of National Statistics. You remember it was whatever percent it was over the next 25 years, and it came out at 75 houses in 25 years is 3 houses a year. So we've got arguably a need for a slow growth in houses. Arguably, although this is not entirely agreed, there is dissent in this particular point, whether we have any space for infill. Not getting the 27 houses, which would have been 9 years worth at 3 a year, and then we're getting things like this, which is a house out in the countryside, which we would probably once upon a time have said, don't think much to that, because normally you don't allow houses to come up like pepper potting, but all of a sudden we're between several conflicting requirements. So all I'm doing is saying that we haven't yet got as far, and I think in 2017 we're going to have some serious discussions ourselves and probably consultation of some sort to decide how we try and move forward with Ashford, with help from planners, with trying to balance all of this, because otherwise we're between the irresistible force and the immovable object. There is pressure on housing. There is a desire, at least in some parts of the village, to have more housing. Not everyone will agree on what they want and where they want it. That's understood. But somehow we have that pressure on the one hand and probably a lack of sites on the other. So that's all I can say at the moment. That's going to come along in the future, but meanwhile we've got a deadline on this application.
Can I also add that there was somebody, was it you, Paul, that commented on the application bits that weren't filled in?
No.
David, somebody.
Wasn't me.
It looked like you are too, so I'm trying to work out who. Anyway, somebody said that the number 11 and number 12 wasn't completed correctly, which was about foul sewage. How's that going to be disposed of? The unknown box was ticked. Are you proposing to connect to the existing drainage system? Unknown, once again. And then when it came to how will surface water be disposed of, and nothing was ticked on that. So it was drawn to my attention. So I've contacted the delegated planning officer, who is Mr. Bax, to say that this was bits were missing and that it was a concern to us because of the drainage problems,
Sure, yeah,
and that's where we got all the drainage problems down
Yeah,
there.
sure.
And I said that I expect he'd noticed it as well and had probably asked for more information. So could he let us know what that information was? And surprisingly, he hasn't actually come back to me.
Okay. Right, who wants to start off on it?
I'm happy to start. I mean, I think I echo a comment made right at the beginning of the discussion. I thought it was a very nice design and seems to fit in very well. I think it certainly will be an advantage over the dilapidated buildings that have been there for some time. And I think in terms of your recent comment as well about the whole sort of plan of the development, I think if it was a building that was in the middle of a field with miles of nothing around it,
Good
I
point.
think that would be a totally different issue. The fact it's right next to a very large development in terms of barns and garages and the beaches, I think it's not, it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. I think it blends in quite nicely. So.
Sue?
And I also thought it was quite a modest design, only being a 3-bedroom, because they probably could have got more in there. I think that's fair enough.
David?
Yeah, I support it for the reasons already given. I think it's a huge improvement, so possibly.
I would agree. I think we need to be mindful of the fact we had a very similar proposal that got turned down by the planners 3 months previously, which was dilapidated old buildings on a piece of land down on the way to Roldan Lane. I support it. I went down and had a look at it, and it's all enclosed with big high trees at the moment, all overgrown, concrete apron and what have you in there. But it's.
Okay, I share your views. I particularly go with George's that it's not in the middle of sort of halfway across the river basin. It is next to a big house. So I think we're supportive, and you mention again the points about the drainage. And of course, in terms of reasons for supporting it, it's what we said. Yeah, indeed. We'll condense that down. Okay, the next planning application is Lordings, Peening Quarter Road, removal of condition 2 on planning permission reference 07 Tiddley to allow the converted Oast House to be used as a separate residential unit in its own right. This is severing it from the ancillary use condition. The Oast House is behind the Lordings rather than the big barn that was refurbished a few years ago when Paul and I first came here, which I think is already severed. So, in a way, what I said as the prelude to the previous one, that fits here again, of course. Either we create we support the creation, if Ashford agree, of a new household, or we don't. In this case, whether Ashford will go for the previous one we just talked about is another matter, but they do seem to be quite happy to sever things, as we saw with the one next to the Gleesons last month.
But this isn't a new building, is it? It's an existing building.
It's an existing building.
Changing its use, so it's not involving building anything.
It's being allowed, if I understand correctly, they will be able to sell it off to a new family rather than just having it occupied by their servants or their gardener or whatever.
Had to be ancillary before to the main dwelling.
Or their nanny or their maid. They probably had all of them.
Well, it's quite nice.
It's a big house, yes. It's a serious house, actually, a lovely house. So, do you want to start us off again, George?
No, only in terms of what I've just said, really, that because it doesn't involve any extra building but provides an additional dwelling, I thought
happy with
it really. And I like other people, I've been and looked, and I've looked on Google Maps and things like that, and it seems I can't see it's going to interfere with anybody. Really.
Yeah. What it is doing, which is a shame in some ways, and other people might say it's a good idea, is it's breaking up a grand house. But then again, that's what happens. It's like grand families.
I'm sure that Ashford will appreciate the increased council tax.
Yeah, indeed, they certainly will. Sue?
I can't actually support it because I think conditions are put in place for reasons, so I wouldn't support it.
Okay. David?
I'd support it given the reasons George has said, but also I think, you mentioned about grand houses, sometimes I think in order for them to, for some sort of longevity, them to continue in a good condition, sometimes you need to take difficult decisions like this, and therefore, I would support it.
You support it? Paul?
I completely take Sue's point, but on balance, I think I'll probably support it on this occasion, because it's just it's not actually adding anything extra. No one's sort of going to extend it, and in that sense, I support it.
Yeah. Okay. I think obviously it's 3-2 anyway. I think, Sue, that in other circumstances I would be with you, and I have said that we shouldn't lose conditions before. I think what's happening, it may be that they will or they won't. I think what's happening here is that beggars can't be choosers, and if we need to see an increase gradually in our housing stock in the village, and we are under pressure to find where the hell to do it, it's the argument I put, which actually was supported by councillors on Tile House, which then Tile House got rejected, didn't it? Yeah, it was the same one. Really, we're not in a position now, as I see it, unless we decide in our discussion in the new year that we really do want to just say the number of houses we've got is enough, or virtually enough. Unless we take that view, we might do. Then we have to grasp at what we can get. We're not in a what would it be? A buyer's market where we can decide exactly what we want. Okay. So anyway, that's gone through on a majority. I will support that. So it's 4-1. Okay. Now we move on to some of the papers that have been done. To consider and agree the draft policy and procedure for co-opting councillors to fill vacancies. Now let me say first of all, the clerk and I found a glitch yesterday, which you may or may not have in your papers. I did it on my Apple Word processor. I exported it to a docx, which went to the clerk. You then found it was fine. I then went back to the email that came out to make sure I'd got the same one as everyone else, and it's fine on the screen, and it prints with the numbering doolally. And we haven't quite got to the bottom of that, but if yours is good, that's fine. I mean, I've got 2 number 1 paragraphs.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that I'm sorry to say that having looked through it again tonight, I did it a long time ago, and it has some glitches still in it. So to the extent that I'm hoping we might agree it tonight, it needs to be agreed with 1 or 2 loose ends to be tied up. In paragraph 3 and 4, there are XX days, which the clerk will need to look up and see what the number is.
Yes.
You all spotted that.
Example of that as well.
Indeed, somewhere else. 3 and 4 it's got, and at the end, yes.
2.
Yes, paragraph,
In paragraph 2 and 3.
No, well, you've got the same numbering as I have then, because I've got 2 paragraph 1s.
Yes, well, everybody's got 2 paragraphs ones. That must have been an issue.
Logically, could I take you back to the title?
Yes, please.
Because it's not actually a procedure for co-opting councillors, it's a procedure for filling vacancies, one of the options of which is co-opting councillors, isn't it? Because you said at the beginning that one option is to have an election, the other option is to go for councillors. So.
But I also then said the election, if there's an election, it's held under Ashford's policies and procedures. So it is really about our policy for co-opting, but I'm explaining how we get to have to co-opt at all. I mean, I take your point, but I'm not really explaining what the procedure for election is. I'm saying sometimes there's an election, otherwise it's co-opting, off we go. The other thing is I've noticed that in number 9, because I think I made another editorial change later, in number 9 a candidate may only be, although it should be for para 10, I've got if the number of candidates for co-option is equal to or lesser than, it should of course be less than. And then in the 4th line, voting in this and or subsequent procedures, and in fact when I thought it through carefully, the and or subsequent and the S on procedures doesn't apply. It's only this procedure. The other one doesn't work this way. Okay? And then over the page, in my case anyway, at the end of the next paragraph, 10 as you've got it, after which each candidate can be voted on and if supported by a majority will be co-opted. And I've put in here, subject to you agreeing, after which each candidate can be voted on in accordance with the procedure in paragraph 10, which is the one before this. This is 10, but it will be 11.
Yeah.
What was that voted on?
In accordance with the procedure
in paragraph 10, yeah. And then right at the end, as George has already pointed out, the last line has got within XX days of taking office has got to be filled in as well. Now, I'm sorry I allowed those glitches to get out, that's my fault. Subject to them, and I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but I did in some parts, but it did seem to me that we ought really to have a proper worked through way of how to do it so that we do not fall into any traps along the way, sort of step-by-step guide. We don't know, of course, if we are after, for argument's sake at the moment, 2 vacancies, do we get 0 or 1 or 2? We don't have an election but on this occasion because people didn't petition for it, but we might have done. In that case we go off of this completely and Ashford does it. In this case we didn't have an election. Now how many applicants do we have by the 2nd of January? Is it 0, 1 or 2? In which case we can simply decide who we want to co-opt, yes or no in each case. If it's 3, 4 or more, we've got to actually come down to 2 first. And that's all laid out here.
Yeah, that's very clear. I thought it was very useful.
Can I just ask,
please, Sue.
in paragraph 4,
yeah,
the wording says, if not less than 10 qualified residents, seemed a little bit back to front to me. I had to think about the wording for it.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I think it was the way of putting
10
10 or more. Yes, it could be.
Yeah,
I think
rather than less than.
I think I'll check, but Ashford actually the notice does
Oh, they say
specify,
that,
and I
yeah.
have a feeling that's what. But I will check.
Oh, well, if that should
Be
call
useful
it
to
that,
match
it'd
up,
have to
wouldn't
be
it?
that.
Yeah.
It just sounded a
But
bit-
yes, I
Saved
will.
by the clerk, it wasn't me. Right.
Oh, well, is it that?
No.
Translation by Ashford, probably.
Yeah, could be that. Yes.
I will check.
Platt Latin. Okay, are people all happy with that?
Yes, yes.
No, okay. So that's subject to those changes, which we can make sure we agree on what they are. That can go through, and of course the bit at the bottom will be turned into a, approved by the Parish Council on the 13th of December, etc. So thank you for that. The next one is to consider agree draft expenses policy. Apart from numbering, which went off again, there's one tiny change I noticed today, but I only noticed it today. In paragraph 2, it's a tiny thing, but to be correct, it says or elected councillors. It should be or elected and co-opted councillors. Because where, for instance, Paul and I were the previous time, where the 2 of you were co-opted, although you're full councillors, you're only co-opted until next time if you stand again and become elected.
Yeah.
So I should have and co-opted in there so it includes everybody.
Can you not just take out the word elected?
It's a council.
You're now trying to shorten things for me.
Heaven forbid.
This policy deals specifically with reimbursement of expenses incurred by the clerk, other employees of the council or councillors. Yeah, quite right. Quite right. Good point, Paul. Thank you.
What are we?
Or councillors.
We're not elected or co-opted.
No, councillors are councillors. That's entirely true.
Yeah.
Okay. Are people happy with that?
Yep.
I think it reflects our discussion.
Yeah, indeed. I hope so. The one thing that struck me today reading it again as preparation for the meeting, and this isn't necessarily true, and I don't know the answer, but it might be, if anyone wants to claim expenses for driving their car, make sure you're insured to do it. Because the insurance people got quite sticky at one time on people getting expenses from their companies. Now, of course, it's not your company, not even in your case, and you're on a special thing. It's not business use, but you might find the insurers are fussy, so be careful if you want to do it. It's certainly okay where I don't claim, because they allow you to do, voluntary work, which is obviously plainly what it is. But I'm just thinking for you of being careful. Okay, so that's expenses done, thank you. The next one is one of the ones that we fell into a hole in last time, the speed integrator device. You have some news.
Yes. I asked Mike Hill, and I had a an email back from Bill Ronan, who is the Community Liaison Officer, Communications and Engagement at KCC, asking whether if one of his colleagues from Highways has been in touch with me and to do with grant communications as well. And I hadn't heard anything at all. And he came back to say, Yvonne, I am not a highways expert, but if you can give me some basic details, site location, road name, etc., I'll put this onto our system and get Mr. Hill's authorisation for the expenditure. So I went back and said, really good news. The council hasn't actually agreed where to site the SID yet. I was just asked at the last meeting to find out if any funding is available. Our next meeting is on the 13th. Could I let you know after that, please? We are interested in the advanced one. Do you know how much the parish council would have to put towards it? So we need to know. Happy to get details following your meeting. He said, I will ask here about the costings and speak to Mr. Hill to get some idea of what the parish council may need to contribute. So, yeah.
That's where we are. Okay. Well, where we left it last time was partly that we had to find out about money, and we obviously haven't got a complete answer, but we've got at least a half-open door. And the other thing was where they're going. You asked a point about, do we keep the existing two? I replied at the time that I suspected if the other part of Kent found out, they'd take them away because they're paying a maintenance contract of some sort or repairs, but we don't know that. We were talking otherwise about potentially one somewhere near Hillside Garage, one somewhere near Martlets, one somewhere down your way. You're outside the 30 limit, aren't you? No, you're inside. Okay, well, somewhere near there. One in the street down sort of, what's that big White House called? Somewhere there, I suppose, or a bit nearer the school maybe. Yeah. And then the other possibility, these are posts of course, the other possibility is somewhere nearer the, potentially I thought, nearer the middle of the village, because some people after they've come down Hell for Leather past the garage, come onto the flat and decide that's an opportunity to put their foot down as they whiz around the narrow part of Poplar Road by the shop.
But there's a lot of parking there. It's not easy to.
That doesn't stop them.
It's accelerating out of the village. It's before you leave Martley. It's before you get to, it's between. From after experience of living at the bungalow, it's between the Swan Corner and Coomlands. They come round the corner and accelerate. And I've been overtaken along that bit.
Sure, you have.
Just thinking, if our new PCO is going to be doing some speed awareness work, he might well have a really good idea of where the hotspots are.
That's the question I was going to ask him tonight, and I forgot to do it.
I think you're right. It would seem silly not to involve him in the conversation.
There's certain examples of some in villages. For example,
Biddenden has it.
Has got a SID. It's not occupied at the moment. Where they park the chip van, that's right in the middle there. And then
Headcorn.
Headcorn has
it
SID
before the station.
That's not there at the moment.
No, but they
absence of SID. I don't know where they've gone. And then the what's that Oak? What's his name? Oak, the Crossroads on the way to
Customs.
Oak. There's a couple there at the moment. Slow down ones.
Okay.
Quite very visible actually. They're really dangerous crossroads. I don't know if they're SIDs or permanent ones, but
I think they're permanent ones.
Yeah. Well, so that's 5, isn't it? I think you've got there. But I take your point. I think getting his input would be worthwhile on 2 counts. One is it pulls him into the whole situation. And secondly, he can provide his experience.
Well, we've got our meeting next in fairly early January, haven't we? Do you remember the date?
Yes, it's on the agenda.
And the only thing is, we would really need to get it sorted then, because not much is going to happen over Christmas with Mike Hill or anything else. But we need to be early January, because otherwise KCC will be closing their accounts in, and we've run out in.
But there's no reason we couldn't talk to Dan.
We can do that before
this meeting.
Indeed.
Well, once he's having it tomorrow, he's doing the thing. So.
You've had a number of people over the last couple of years expressed concern about speed, haven't you? So
a lot.
Yes. You might want to put their names forward to Dan, because they'd be clearly wanting to volunteer for a speed watch, wouldn't they? as they wished for it.
All right, about all we can do at the moment. Because okay.
Thank you.
To consider budget and precept proposals for next year. Now you've had papers come out from the clerk, which I think are pretty straightforward. And we also, did you see the paper that came out from Ashford today with a lot of tables in it?
No, I just sent it to you.
Oh, it's only to me. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yes, only came out yesterday.
Right.
So the concurrent functions grant is the same, but unfortunately we're £40 short on the council tax support grants this year. Instead of the 1,000, it's 960.
Well, that's a lucky
So
escape.
we've got 40 less than obviously I've shown.
Apart from that, the other things that are so those they're tables of those two that the clerk's just mentioned, and then we get to the big detailed spreadsheet, and as far as Wittersham is concerned, our tax base, which is the number of Band D equivalents. Now, I'm not just sure, Yvonne, you can perhaps help me. Is the tax base the number that we're going to get?
I don't know.
Or is it the number before they knock off the halves and the old peoples and the this and the that?
I don't know.
Because what I did notice was that if we take the tax base, which last year was, sorry, this year, well, it's the only tax base they give us, is 525.3. I remember when it was about 500 when I joined the council, so I don't know quite how we've gone up to 525. I mean, it could be that some houses have been uplifted in bands, of course, because, you know, it's Band D equivalents. But we've got five...
Down the valuation?
No, but if you build something, they can do. If you put a new bedroom in and that. Anyway, 525 is the figure. This year we had 29,995 at £40.06. And then we got the council tax support grant of 1,000, which has gone down to 960.
That was last year.
That's last year. That's last year.
Before.
We put it up 11%, which went to 42.37.
Put it up by 6%.
Percentage change in the precept 11%, and then percentage change 6%. Don't ask me. That's what they've written. 1580 is the concurrent grant allocated, and we got 24,835 in total. Now, so as far as those numbers are concerned, by the way, £42.37 was our Band D in the current year. Within the Ashford Borough, I'll just go through the big ones. Aldington and Bonington, £47. Appledore, £81. Biddenden, 45. Bilsington, 50. We don't know all these places. Brook, 45. Charing, 63. Great Chart, 63. High Holden, 46. Some a little bit higher than us, some quite a lot. Yeah. Canardington, 45. Little Chart, 48. And that's for 6,000 houses, by the way. Newenden, I understand their problem, they've got no houses, 49. Pluckley, £93. Don't know why. Tenterden, 107. They'd say there are a lot more services. Westwell, 48. Us, 42, as I said. And Y, 81, 82. So we are. There's a load lower than us, but there are quite a few higher. In terms of the budget that the clerk has given you, that's this sheet. Yeah. That's pretty much, you know, steady as she goes, very much what it was before. The clerk's salary goes up slightly, insurance up slightly, and so on. These are small numbers of changes, really. The big things are at the bottom, where we have now budgeted for the notice board at 1,400, the one outside of the hall here, and the Kissing Gate 300 that we agreed we would do last time. Okay, and the contingencies have been reduced accordingly, because we've, in effect, you know, the contingencies pay for things. We've decided 2 of them that we're likely to pay for. Now, in terms of the precept, we've got the same number in the well, there's nothing in the 2017-18 column. We know what 16-17 was. If it went up 2%, it adds 445. Okay. We don't know at the moment. I looked on the website today of Declog, and at least it's not in the website whether they've done it or not. There's no sign of them having taken a decision on whether there's going to be a referendum above 2% or not for parish councils, local councils. We were promised by the civil servant at the Calc AGM last month that they would tell us by the end of November, and it may be rattling through Nalc and Calc, but I've seen nothing, and they would normally tell us straight away because they know we're all working on budgets.
Don't you think they'd put a break on that, given
they've had a hell of a lot of
8% council tax?
Yeah, well,
that's put a real brick in the pond.
Yes, that's of course at the other principles. Yeah, I think it's unlikely because they've had such strong consultation responses telling them how bad it would be. But every year they threaten us with it. We are, on the face of it, if you on the left hand, as it were, left hand, right hand. On the left hand, we're okay. We're not short of money. On the right hand, we have a huge bill to pay on the cemetery. And I think that if we just clear our cash out, which is pretty much what we would do, having, of course, we've been building cash up ready for the cemetery, but if we just clear our cash out and we don't do anything significant to the precept, we will be prey to anything that comes along that we need money for a while. And therefore I think, if you agree with me, there's a case for an increase in the precept unless we get capped, to bring in a bit more money each year, which will help to rebuild our cash. And I would suggest if we went up, for argument's sake, 8% instead of 2, then that's 445 times 4 is 1800, and we've also made a little bit on the tax base going up since last year. That made us 100 and something, so we'd be more or less 2,000 better off. That would be if we did 8%. Now, at one level, I'm reluctant to keep saying, oh, well, we'll just do this, we'll just do that, because our people here have to pay it. On the other hand, if a band D, and incidentally, around Forge Meads and that, they usually Cs, not Ds, there are a few Bs, no Cs. But a band D at £42 is 80p a week. If we're putting 8% on 80p a week, it's another 6pence halfpenny a week. Are we in danger of getting too anxious about small amounts? Everything adds up, I know, but these are very tiny amounts. So, what's people's reactions?
Certainly doesn't make any sense to leave up the potential of not having the money we need to do things.
Sure.
For example, the SIDS, I guess, are going to take some maintenance.
Of course, yeah.
So then that's going to be an additional expense when we get those. So it's something else we've got to look at. But yes, counter that, as you just said, on the other hand, we don't want to be charging people extra money for the sake of doing that either.
The other thing is, of course, that if you don't put things up year by year, then what you do is you start getting into a bit of a hole and then have a big one.
I agree. I think that some improvements on and planning for the future makes a lot of sense. We are going to have a big hole in the cemetery, and we don't know what else is around the corner. So
and the cemetery, of course, is the best excuse. I mean, we it's not an excuse.
It's not the reason.
It's the best reason we could have. Because not only is it a big sum, but it's a big sum on behalf of, very much on behalf of residents.
I think it's important as well to make residents aware of why the increase is happening and what extra things we're getting as a result of that.
Well, we can put a note in the Outlook, as has been done in the past by John, if the editors are happy. We've not had a single complaint that I know of. What's your position, David?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the position we're in with the cemetery is quite extraordinary. It's not something the parish or council has had to face for many, many years, and hopefully won't have to face again.
It's a year and a half's council tax.
It is, yeah. I guess just 8% sounds a bit more excessive than I had anticipated. 6%, I think I could just about swallow. 8% just.
Well, it's about 65 pence.
But I don't think people look at it that way.
Well, is it 65 pence? Did I get that right? No, I didn't. 8% is
£3.20.
Yeah. Forget that.
It's what did you say it was?
£3.20 a year.
£3.20
Yeah.
a year.
So I was exaggerating it per week. I was saying it was a few pence a week, wasn't it? Not 64. I said 6 pence or something, or 8 pence.
Old money.
Yeah, in old.
I think if we make it clear, why it's being done, that's important. I had another question on the hiring of the club room seems to have gone down by 25%. Is that?
Yeah, because if you look at, no, we're just not using,
don't use it
because
as
when we first did it, we thought we might have more meetings for this, that, and the other, but we're not. So it seems silly.
Already made an impact. Congratulations.
Right.
Can I just go back?
Please,
So
David.
I think when we talk about, I do think that we need to make it really clear about the cost of the work we're having to do to get the cemetery into a position where it's sustainable. Because I don't, and we've had a very generous gift of the plot of land, but actually the cost associated with getting it into the place we need it to be. I just think all of that needs to be called out.
Yeah, well, we've got this is an estimate at the moment, obviously, but we've got it down here, as you saw, listed out, and we expect to spend over the period of bringing the new piece into use, where we've got to get access, we've got to plough it, we've got to fell a few trees, only a few. We've got the land agents' fees, 2 lots of solicitors' fees, the fencing, and other works, and we've got an outline figure there of 30,000, which is why I said almost 18 months worth of council tax.
Yeah.
So can I take it that are you on for the 8th then, or only 6?
I will go with the majority. So if the majority is saying 8%,
are you all right on that, Sue?
I'm very much like David. I think if you say 8%, it's going to sound.
Well, we don't actually say any percentage, although I have an idea the council tax bill puts a percentage in. All we're going to ask for is a precept.
How much increase are we talking a year if it's 8% on a band D? This is.
On a band D, at the moment, we're on £42.37. So 8 fours are 32. Would be about £3. 8% would be about £3.40 a year.
An increase of £3.40
per year.
£3.39. Yes.
But what we've got to, obviously, you can't take it in isolation, because there will also be presumably an increase in council tax generally applied.
Oh, no question.
Ashford, won't there? So it's not just an extra thing.
No.
There is something else as well.
Since Kent will charge a band D about £1,000, I think, 2% there, even just 2, and they're not going to be 2 because they've got this social thing if it's approved. But 2% there is £20. This is where we're the very small tail on all of this.
I think as long as we can be seen not to be just plucking figures out of the air, that we're coming up with a figure that's based on reality of what our anticipated expenditure will be, then I think people understand.
And we're going to have to put all of that, all the 30,000 ourselves. There's no.
Well, I saw your note earlier. A point that Clark made was we get we get the concurrent functions grant from Ashford, which is about 1,000 or 1,500, was it? 1,500? Concurrent functions.
1580.
Yeah,
1,600
a year. That's a wet finger from Ashford towards things that we do that they don't. And arguably, I don't know how they've taken account of the cemetery, but if you were in Tenterden, it's an Ashford cemetery, although funnily enough, I did see something today that Tenterden is possibly going to take it away from Ashford. Take it over from them. But at the minute it's Ashford's. Because I asked at the Tenterden forum, thinking, there'll be someone who can give us advice on cemeteries, they'll know all about it. They said, nope, it's Ashford's.
Should we make a decision?
Please do.
Well, what we can do is, now that you've all had time to think about it, I will put forward the 8%, redo it all, because it will have to be on the next month's agenda to ratify it. So we haven't got to make the final decision now. Now that we've, these were given to you so you could see what the position is. Now you've discussed the fors and againsts. You've got now time. I will redo this, send it out to you. You can have another think.
The deadline at Ashford is about the 20th of January, so we're ahead of that.
Yes, I got to
reach our decision then.
Yes, that's right. We need to be.
Okay, that's good. But we're tentatively on 8. Tentatively. Okay. Number 2. Agenda. I've lost the agenda.
Volunteer support warden.
The volunteer support warden. Well, there is an issue. It's come out at a very poor time, I'm afraid. As the clerk pointed out to me, we've got no outlook to advertise it. We didn't get anywhere last time. On the other hand, my view was that, which is why I asked it to go on the agenda, that I understand that we may very well not be successful, but I don't like losing the opportunity lightly. I think it would be very helpful to us. We know that Jo is very pressed between Tenterden and the other villages. We get a bit of her time, like tonight, but not that much. It's not as good as in the previous chap's arrangements because he didn't have as much ground to cover. He didn't have to cover Tenterden for a start. If we had a volunteer, that volunteer would be ours. But on the other hand, we've got to find one, and we didn't find one before.
And there was a cost involved, wasn't there, for equipping and uniforming this person?
Yes.
There's a bit. KCC is doing a bit. It would cost us a bit.
Well, I think it was it £300?
Something like that, yeah.
So you're proposing that we re-advertise the post?
Well, I would like us to, but the trouble is there are practical difficulties as to getting anywhere at all with it.
Is there
it'd be better if we knew someone, of course.
Yeah. Is there a neighbourhood watch in the village?
Well, there's Alec.
There's Alec.
Right.
Taylor.
Our coordinator.
And is there anybody else? I'm just thinking, is the way of combining or asking or...
That's it.
Just, yeah, he just...
Right, but there's not a proper neighbourhood watch like a lot of villages have with... Okay, all right. I think you could advertise it again, but you're not going to do it in time, are you?
It's not going to go in the Outlook. This has got to be by the 20th of January again.
We're not going to suddenly, spirit up a team of volunteer wardens.
No, it's the wrong time of the year. It's the wrong time of the year.
I don't know. Maybe we could formally write to all the societies and the clubs in the village and say, would you like to? I mean, that's how a lot of the sort of fulfilling of community organisations has happened in the past when you've got representation of it. I don't know.
Yes,
appeals in the past haven't produced anything.
No.
So do we just say no? Sorry, unfortunately, we're not interested.
But going to societies, for instance, with regard to co-opting another councillor, that's what we suggested we did. So I spoke to, because WI. Women, we wanted women, so I spoke to Jean Elliott and the secretary last Tuesday, and she said we don't have many members. Most of our members are elderly, and they do other things. So this seemed my ideal place to go, but they couldn't, and this is the trouble with our village. You've got an awful lot of people, we've got a lot of people that do a lot of things, haven't you? When you look around the table.
I would argue against that. I would say we've got a few people in the
All right.
who do a lot
I
of
was
things.
being...
No, seriously. I think it's
yeah, I
it's
didn't like to say that.
We've discussed in the past, I think it's a real issue that
yes.
we're not going to solve tonight, but it's something over longer term we need to address how somehow a lot of these services, not just this one, a dependent speed watch, for example, this or sort of parish council, village hall, community hall, etc. It's all dependent on voluntary time and support, and that is steadily going downhill in the village. And I think that as a parish council, we need to have a longer think about this. Is it a trend we can't reverse? Is it just a sign of the times? You know, when you say that, for example, I'm not blaming WI, by the way, if they say they've all got other things and they're too busy, you know, people do lead busy lives, and you know, we need to kind of get our thinking caps on and see how maybe we can, I don't know, was suggested in the past, when we were doing the emergency plan that Pat was leading, we did informally discuss talking about, you know, putting together a sort of volunteer bureau or a sort of a register of talents or something like that. And maybe we need to, rather than plunge straight in and say who wants to put on a uniform and march around the village, we need to kind of start with just gathering in and asking people if they've got skills or time or services that they can volunteer and build that. I know we call it a register, or lots of villages have volunteer bureaus. That's just a possible start. I don't know.
I think it wasn't just women, it was about younger people as well.
Yes.
I think another source of informing people would be the school newsletter that goes home every week, because that's an age group that would be we really ought to be in better contact with, really. And then you're contacting through the school probably 80 families each week.
I think, you know, when we had that last warden thing, I went to, you know, great, we had a session here, we had a session there, and it went, I did a link in the magazine, you know, in the thing as well, so school thing. So you do, I think a lot of it is word, is word of mouth. People are more likely if you ask them, rather than say, will you give us your name? So it's a case of those that...
Funny enough, I had somebody mention that to me today, that they'd like to volunteer to do some sort of charitable work in the village, and where do they go to?
Really?
I've directed them towards Judy, because I know she does, you know, not necessarily church. And I've also pushed them towards a school, because I said they need readers.
Well, now you need to go back to them and push them towards being a village warden.
I don't think it would...
Councillor? Councillor?
Would like to be a councillor.
It's one of your walkers.
I think we need more to think this one through and come up with a plan for the future. On you know, the question hanging over everything is why don't people volunteer anymore? I mean, obviously some people do, but you know, it's going down. And you know, can we reverse that trend? What do we do if we can't? You know, where do we go? And there are people, when you talk to them, who will say, "Oh, I didn't know." I mean, I'm not criticising you.
No, but once again, you're talking to them. This is what I'm saying. It's more likely I can put an article in the Outlook asking, and people just read it. But if you said, "Had you thought of doing it?" then that's...
They just say no.
No, but I think we need to
didn't ask the right way.
Somehow move that forward. I don't know how. There's no magic answer, but I think it's worth us spending some time.
Yeah, I think about it as a principle of what we do.
You know,
so maybe this whole volunteer bureau,
quote
unquote idea is something we ought to be discussing during our programme next year.
I think so. Yes. Well, in the very short term, we're not going to be producing wardens per volunteer scheme. I think we need to be careful by going back and saying that it's an idea that we would, in principle, if we do, support. Right now, it's not one that we can provide someone, but we don't want to turn off that.
No.
If we can. Okay, all right, let's move on. But if you keep a note for the fact that that's something to come back to next year, not wardens, but the general position.
Can we think about doing something ahead of our AGM?
Our annual parish meeting.
Yeah, it could be something that we think about launching at our AGM and making a bit of a thing about it.
Good point.
I think people do volunteer, but I think there are so many different places now because of the economic environment. People have been called to volunteer in so many different places. We just want to see if we can get bit of that community.
Well, your litter picking is a good example, actually. That's a small bit of volunteering on our doorstep to benefit the community. So if we can position it, I think that's well.
But we just need to be really tenacious with it and keep at it.
So, okay, so it could be a point at the parish meeting. Okay, the next thing is this point on the social club, sports club, whatever. Let me ask first, I put, by the way, draft at the top when I wrote it. This isn't a draft, it's just a paper that we're considering. It's not a draft policy. Can I just ask first what people's views are on it?
Just to kick off, I think my concern is about the whole thing, and as we've
sorry, can I just
asking something?
You were going to read it out.
I am. I'm waiting to find out what councillors think about it first.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Just an immediate reaction.
Yeah, I'm just going to give a general
comment. It may get.
As we've heard earlier, it's quite a contentious issue, and I think there are a lot of unresolved issues and facts around that. And it's my view that I think we ought to wait until something is resolved in terms of either the lease or the social club or the sports club, that something is down to being fact, because we're not really sure at the moment what's going on or what's resolved, before we state our position, because we could find ourselves in that we've stated this is the parish council's position without knowing all the information and facts, and it could come back to bite us if then things turn out not as we expected.
This is only seeking, I may not have done it very well, but this is only seeking to be historic, of course. Everything here has already happened. I'm not actually looking, I mean, it was I take the blame for this. The wording in the agenda of its future is probably misleading and has led to some concern among members of the public. It's really focusing on what our historic position is and sweeping it up to make it clear that we do not have no position on anything to do with the sports and social club, sports club, call it what you will.
I think that's an important issue.
It's the things that we have already done.
You keep saying sports and or social club, whatever, and I think that's one of the issues, isn't it? What are we talking about? Are we talking about the sports club? Are we talking about the social club? Are we talking about one entity?
As it was put to us, there's no legal entity across the social club. What I said in the wording, I'll come to the paper in a minute, I did put immediately after the first mention of the sports and social club brackets, I use this title loosely and without taking a view on the various names used by the club in its lease and elsewhere. I shall refer to it as the club. In other words, I wasn't setting out to, although I know the title says Wittersham Sports and Social Club, because I had to call it something, but I then make it clear that I'm not taking a position on that. Anyway, thank you, George. That's all right. No, that's okay. Thanks for that. So, I think if I endeavoured to summarise your position on it, you'd say you'd rather duck out of it. It's either premature or you'd rather not have anything.
I think premature is the word I would use. I think we're too early.
You take the same view.
I mean, what I appreciate, all that you put in here is what's gone on in the past.
I'm hoping it's factually correct.
I don't think it's anything to do with us. I think we need to stay out there. With what's going on at the moment, we don't need to get involved in it.
What I want to know is what's the it?
All what's going on with the sports club and the social club and the charitable thing.
There's no mention of charitable thing here.
No, but it will be all dragged into it. And I think at this particular time, we don't need to do anything.
Okay, but now let me just explore that with you, if I may, Sue. At this moment, we've resolved in the past to accept a request from John Mallet, if he decides to make it. It is in his will at the moment, unless he's changed it since I was told that it was in there, which was a while ago. He has agreed to my suggestion that I should meet him when he's in England next time, because he knew John Rivers and he doesn't know me. Those things are all on the stocks. I mean, what this was seeking to do was draw attention to things like that and say it's not that we have no position on this thing. We do have certain fragments of a position. You might say it's not coherent, or you might say it's not complete, but it's not that we have no interest in and nothing to do with. I mean, we've also been going through the Voices agenda that's mentioned here, and Voices say sports club hugely important to the village, and we're going through the Voices agenda saying, you're right, yeah, we're supporting what Voices wanted, that's why we set it up. So what this is seeking to do, I understand your position, if I correctly identify it, as being fed up at being dragged into another argument that is not ours, and I said in the public session, I don't think the argument that was put tonight is ours, but that's not quite the same in my reading of it as saying we have nothing to do with the sports club at all, because we do. We've made resolutions, we've agreed to do certain things.
But I think what we're saying is,
unless by the way,
now isn't the time to be stating it.
Well, okay, the reason I'm stating it here, if we agree, and we may very well not from the looks of it, the reason I'm stating it here is I don't want to be argued left, right and centre later on at other meetings saying you don't have a position on the sports club and now you're talking to John Mallet about it, or you know, you don't have. And by the way, I did report earlier that I was going to be, I'd said I would meet him when he came, and he said it'll be in the new year. So I don't want it to be. I seek to be. I know that there may be hollow laughter from the public seats, but I seek to be as transparent as I can be within the progress of the council's business. And I felt after going home last time, having said, and you agreed with me when I said, in particular, Sue, we didn't have that settled position on the sports club when we were told that we'd been called in, claimed to be in full support of it, and we couldn't have been because, as was pointed out, we hadn't resolved that. And I thought, well, we've gone from claimed to be in full support, claimed in response to that saying, no, we're not, no, we haven't done that, no, we're not in support of it, except the two of us are members. Neither of those end positions are true. There's a few bits in the middle that are true. We have done this, we have done that, we have done the other. And all this was doing, it may not be doing it very elegantly, I'll come to exactly what it says shortly if we go further, was to try and lay out for the council to agree or not. And I, to be honest, I didn't see it as controversial when I wrote it. I thought it was just dredging up everything in my mind as to what can I think about sports clubs that the council's done. Well, it's done this, 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 it's done this. Okay, is that where we are? They're the things we've done, so that they're quite clearly on the record, and we're not opening ourselves to being accused of saying we had done nothing and all of a sudden we had done something. But if I've done it inelegantly, we either don't do it at all or we do it better. David.
So I guess I was surprised when I opened it.
Right.
Because I didn't know that this was. So I get why you've done it, but I guess very similar to the point you made. I think we've gone too soon with this.
Right.
I get what you're trying to get at, but I think we're in the middle of a very difficult situation. And I'd like to see a resolution, because I know it's causing some friction or unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've given it enough thought as a council.
Well, this is the first time. I'm trying to deal with the ricochet from last time.
But I don't think it was. There was one comment made about the parish council's position, but I don't think that's really what was being got at that meeting.
At the last meeting.
At the last meeting. The concern, to what I'm hearing, is around the social aspect of the sports club that has grown and isn't what was written into the charitable trust, rather than this.
That's definitely true in the sense that that's the position of the members of the public who talked about it last time and this. And of course that's a part which I haven't dealt with here because the council hasn't dealt with it.
And it's not ours to deal with.
No. Well, only if and when we become the landlord.
Yeah. Oh, that's different.
That's different. And that may never happen, by the way. it's quite on the cards that things will change and that won't happen. I'm not saying it won't, I'm not saying it will, but it's definitely not, as I read it, it's not a bit of settled business. It was, but it's been unsettled. It's a bit rocky. So, Paul, what do you think?
I think that the first point you made, this is an attempt to kind of pull together historical. This is not proposals for the future, and I applaud you for putting the time and effort to try, because it's the first time I've sort of seen as much of this information gathered in one place. For me, one of the most important parts of it was the third section, which talks about the securing the future of the club being an important topic in the amenity section of the recent community-led plan, the Voices Initiative, and we were charged and supported with that, and it's not just the club there. We were looking at wider topics within sports, for example, the tennis courts, where they're going to go. Are they going to go on that particular sports field? One of the things that seems to me is that's, as a parish council, I think we exist for the benefit of all of the community, all the village. Right? I've made that point before. It's about improving the quality of life for everybody. It's about improving services. It's about making sure that things that range from speed or schools or hospital access or doctors. I'm not sure that we could, with any credibility, stand up in front of the village as a whole and say, actually, we don't have a view on the sports and social club. We don't want to have anything to do with it. All you lot go away from different factions, sort it all out, and when you've decided what the legal standing is, come back to us. That sort of Pontius Pilate approach, I don't think would give us any credibility at all. So, whether we like it or not, I think it is an important issue. It is very central, and there are at least two views on it, right? And there are many, many more that I've heard from people as well. It was referred to as a drinking club. I'm not a member of the drinking club in Wittersham. I'll say that for a fact. I am a member of whatever this is called, and I thought it was called the Wittersham Recreation Club. So I admit there's confusion, isn't there? We kind of know what it is there. The other thing that I think is quite important is that, having been a member of sports clubs in different parts of the country, and I'm currently a non-playing member of the England Rugby Club, but I am officially, but I don't clearly play. There are, as I understand it, there are members, I think, of sports clubs who don't actively actually go out and put the shirt on and run around the pitch. They do other things, very importantly. They maintain the equipment. They fundraise. They manage the social activities. A sports club is not just players who go out there. Neither is sports, in my view, restricted to football or cricket. If you actually look at, and actually it's quite interesting, if you look at the recognised sports in this country, the official recognised sports, you will find some of those I guarantee you've never heard of, and you'll find something that's quite surprising. So, for example, if one of you wanted to start up the Wittersham Arm Wrestling Club, right, which is not necessarily an outdoor sport, it is legitimate as a recognised sport. You can have active participants, and you can also have supporters. So I think we all need to be very careful about wishing for certain things to happen, because it is a big can of worms. I fully respect that there are different views and people getting very involved and emotions run high, and I take George and David's points on that. I don't think we can just do nothing and sit by. It is important to the village and the future of the village. If the land went away, you could have probably 350 houses on that. That's the best example of infilling. That'd be quite interesting if nobody did anything and didn't put up a fight there. I suspect that wouldn't happen. So, pulling it all together, I applaud Jeremy's first attempt at kind of pulling this all together. I don't think it's something that we can make a ruling in the way that, dare I say it, some of our law lords are being rather strangely asked to do at the moment. And there are certain things that need to be clarified. Exactly what can go on. It's been referred to as something that's illegal. Well, if there's illegal activity, then I suggest people take it up with Dan, because clearly if it's against the current law, he can pull together a whole load of his mates and come and arrest everyone in there. But I don't think that would help matters. So clarification. At the end of the day, there are, I think I was told, in excess of 80 households in the village who are now members, paid up members.
I think it's 100 not.
100 odd now. I don't know how many people that is. I don't know how many people went to the inaugural opening when they but there were a lot of. This was not just sort of hardened drinkers who were there. There were a lot of children, a lot of wives, family members, all sorts of things. Through the summer months, there were a lot of people who enjoyed that as a social amenity for the village. In the colder months, in November, they had a very successful Halloween party for over 50 children, of which people like Corkers very generously donated food. A lot of volunteers, there's a clue, gave a lot of time and help and effort there. And I've been down. I've gone down with my son. We've actually talked rugby. We've talked football. There's been sport on the screen. We haven't gone down for attempt to beat the Wittersham pint drinking record. And it's a very pleasurable, warm, cosy environment. And it seems, in my opinion, this is only my opinion, it seems to be run by someone with a lot of experience in running hostelries and places like that in the village, and has a great spirit. However, this is a big if, it's unresolved business. And there are, completely agree with you, there are a whole series of things that need to be resolved so that ultimately whatever happens, it's a benefit to people in the village, and it's clear. In the meantime, I don't think we can make some pronouncement that Wittersham Parish Council thoroughly supports the current situation. Neither should we say we're dead against it. I think we need to say that we're considering it, and it's important, as all amenities and services are, that we take an active interest. But it's important to say that we will do our level best to research, to inquire, to try and aid sensible discussion. And this is part of that process. Sorry, I've gone quite a long time.
That's all right. Well, what this, of course, thank you. What this was seeking to do, of course, was just to list the things which we had taken a position on and say what they were. And of course, what's not here is what we haven't done. We haven't done anything on the charities side. We've read the things which Mrs. Walton sent us in before. I certainly have, I think, and the clerk, I think the rest of you have. Not an area for us. We had it read out to us. About Sir John, our previous chairman, John Rivers. I think I agree with you, Paul, that we are not absent any interest in it, which is what I also wanted to get on the agenda, or on the table, if you like, as could have been left as an impression last time. We're not completely absent any interest in it, nor indeed are we fully supportive of it, because we haven't ever resolved that, and we're not about to tonight. And I didn't seek it, but we should. I mean, all I was asking for is invited to consider, and if agreed, confirm that its established position on the club and its future is outlined above, in order to avoid further confusion or misunderstanding. In other words, it was just these ingredients. Now, I think that my sense of the discussion that we've just had is that there is a majority against going any further with this. I think it leaves a bit of a vacuum, and I'm not sure if anyone's got an idea as to how to fill the vacuum.
So for me, what's missing, Jeremy, so I applaud you for putting this together. What's missing for me is some of that framing that you've just taken us through. So I think if there was something more that frames perhaps the intent and points to the historical piece. But for me, what's not really clear is the relationship that we have with the trustees.
We don't
have that.
And that's I guess where I get
they're an independent club.
Yeah. So where does their responsibility end, and where does ours begin in relation to the sports club?
I think we're two islands. We don't have a sort of a boundary. We're two islands with our own interests. They have an interest and we have an interest, but because we have an interest in the whole village, varies from place to place and item to item and agenda to agenda. They're part of it, and of course one of the things, I don't know which bit of the Local Government Act it is, but we do have, for instance, a power to do things for, loosely speaking, the good of the village, the good of the community. Now, we're not about to say, okay, well, that authorises us to go and spend our £7.42 per elector or whatever it is on the sports club. But basically, we are authorised to take an interest in the, the sort of good of the community. This is part of it. But we're still an island. They're not governing us, and we're not governing them. But we have interest because, for instance, Paul first brought the idea, we didn't in the event do it, Canberra did it, but because he brought the idea to us of saying we should make the pub, when it was still a pub, isn't now, an asset of community importance, and although Canberra did it, we supported that all the way, and we actually supported it when Ashford asked us for our opinion before they confirmed it. That was to say, we believe, as Wittersham Parish Council, that having a place for, let's say, alcoholic refreshments and gathering together is useful to community cohesion. Of course, some people will be teetotal, some people won't go, but it is useful to community cohesion. That was a position that we took formally. It happened to be directed towards Swan as it was, but it was I've explained it here, it was a measure of the thinking of the council as to what was good for the village. And I said, well, you know, the sports club and its present arrangements with the social club are not the same. They're a private club for a start, but they do fall loosely within the same umbrella. That was an example of I was looking for all the council positions I could think of, that rather than have someone say, well, you did this, but you told me you didn't. That's all I was trying to do. But obviously it is premature, it isn't agreed.
I would still reiterate what I said at the beginning. I think because it is so contentious and there's so many unresolved issues that we should wait until some things are resolved and sorted before we state our position.
Okay, as I said, it's all historic. These are things we have stated. These are not things, I'm not trying to state anything that we haven't already done. But if people don't want to do that, then fine, I understand it. I mean, there's a majority against.
But it is, I make the point, it's an amenity, right? The school is the same. Parish council don't run the school.
No.
But you know, or the village shop.
But we have, indeed. But you see, we haven't been asked. We haven't been asked quite definitely and clearly what our position is, and said we don't have one. If we had said we don't have a position on the village school, I might then have gone away and said, well, actually, is it that clear? Or do we in fact have one? And then have tried to write one.
But your point about the piece in the Local Government Act does give a duty of care, if you like, principle to parish councils to look at and to do things for the benefit of the community as a whole. I take David's point about the fact that I agree with him on that. I think we do need a framing. There's a sort of the next version of this, if you like, to move on from there, is to get more information, is to frame it, to find out a little more about what's going on.
Okay.
Things are going to. We're not the arbiters of what's developing at the moment. There are various parties doing various things, and maybe we should just sort of say, okay, well, let's see how that goes. But I think it's clear that we're not saying we are against it either.
No,
I'm not saying it.
Okay, well, in that case, this hasn't gone anywhere. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's the position that I put to you for consideration. And the view is, no, we don't want to have it. So, that hasn't gone anywhere. And I think, although I said earlier I would read it out, I don't think there's any point reading it out when we've decided it isn't our position.
Okay.
So, that is just, as I said earlier, that is done in. And for those who are anxious to know what was in it, it was all that I have just said. It was a list of things that I could think of where we had earlier, and Mrs. Lewis attends every council meeting, so you've heard them all, things where we had already taken a position. It was no more, no less than that. Okay? So, we haven't done that at all. Next item on the agenda is... to authorise payments to reimburse the clerk for the purchase of the Blue Yeti microphone. Good night, Roger. Good night, Mary.
Good night.
Good night, Valerie. Good night, Chris. So, to authorise payments, the clerk for the purchase of the Blue Yeti microphone, £83.33 plus VAT, which made £99 something.
99. Can I just say, Paul, you asked at the last meeting that I inquire elsewhere as to getting it cheaper.
No, that's
and I went down the line.
No, I've seen it. I think it's magnificent.
But I did go. I did the charities buying group. I've now signed up with, because you have to sign up to get that. So,
yes.
But they hadn't got it there. I went to Culk and they didn't do that sort of thing either. So I did. So I did go through did check first before we went ahead to get that.
And then we went and bought it in Parish because that was cheapest.
Really?
Easy one. Yes.
Okay, so that's agreed. Agreed, you can have the money back.
Thank you.
No correspondence,
No.
Nothing for noting. Working with party reports. Caretaker, I don't think there's...
But just the only thing I would say is just to note that obviously the bins over Christmas, Alfie's going to come in on Boxing Day to check that everything is all right, ready for them to collect on the following day.
Does he know?
Does he know that? And all the collection dates have been changed. You will receive something through your door telling you.
Obviously, yes. I don't. I get it through. I have seen through the email.
Yeah.
Yes.
No bringing your rubbish here then.
Okay.
I won't be here.
Monthly transaction statement. I don't have one. Did you put that out earlier?
Yeah, no,
no.
Went.
Oh, maybe I did. Sorry, maybe I did.
No, they went round. But I was. Is there a spare? Here you go. There you go. There's one there.
Thank you.
Anybody else want one? There's loads here. There shouldn't be loads.
Okay.
Oh yes, because I thought we got 7 councillors. So used to printing out.
You're thinking of the pantomime.
Oh no, she's.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so the main monthly transaction statement.
Yes,
and
I don't think there's.
Which is the caretakers.
I don't think there's anything untoward, unusual.
On the caretakers side, we split the VAT out.
Yeah.
Anyone concerned before I sign it? Can I borrow George's best pen, please?
Can I borrow your pen, please?
Certainly the community pen.
So will the van still keep going, or are we still thinking about it?
It still keeps going.
As long as it does.
Yes, it's getting, yes, oh yes.
It'll have a crisis eventually.
Yes.
MOT time or something. Okay, planning. We've had these decisions received, which we don't need to go through. The only one I would draw attention to is Stafford Farm Moons Green. The outline planning permission that was granted for the Gleesons. Firstly, I would say that I wanted to give proper acknowledgement to Miriam for her involvement with the applicants. I thought that was really helpful, so thank you very much. I know that you took Sharon along for pre-prep at one of the council committee meetings, and you'd coached her a bit, and you'd helped her a lot, and I believe she did very well. And I'd also like to thank David for attending and,
Billy Joe,
and swinging.
Billy Joe
I always call her something else.
Yeah, Billy Joe was the name you were after.
Yes, when I call her Sharon, I usually do. I don't know why. I'm sorry about that. I do mean Billy Joe. And David, you did a great job as well. And I mean, it was very. Miriam obviously is the only other one who heard it all go through, but I gather it was difficult. It was close, and I'm told by Billy Joe that they spent longer discussing her bungalow than they did the big schemes in Ashford.
Yeah.
So first class, thank you very much. And as I say, and I do mean this genuinely, Miriam, and thank you very much for your involvement. I think that was a result for Wittersham, and one that the planners in Ashford will not forgive us. Okay, highways, Paul.
Nothing really to report at the moment. There's 1 or 2 potholes that are appearing.
The ones that were at the top. I would just like to add that on my thing about saying that health and safety things are done quite quickly. Round by past John's, where John lives, the pavement there, Anne Hall had a fall in the dark a week or so ago and grazed her knee quite badly. Following day, I reported it as a danger. Day after that, it was they came out and marked it. Hasn't been done yet, but
they
did come out straight away.
There's
So
a plaque that says President of Calp lives here.
Yes.
Fall down here.
Can I just ask, where Lording's bungalow is, there's always water on the road there, constantly.
I think it comes out of the nursery.
Comes out of the
You know, the
bank.
nursery
Where
with
it's
the couple of
Yes,
blankets, things
down
that
to
pour down
Yeah,
there.
Comes out of the bank, I think, doesn't it?
Is it?
Yeah.
It's one of those
It's
things you
always
can't
been
stop, isn't it?
Well, especially when it's iced over, which I haven't had yet.
Yeah.
That is,
Oh, it has.
that is
The
lots
other
of
week it
fun.
was. There's a
Yeah,
sheet
it was
of ice
actually,
all
yes.
down there.
Yeah.
right, I can always report it though.
And it can't just be water coming off the field because it's an awful lot, isn't it?
I just assumed it was a spring or something
Looking
under the
at.
bank.
It may well be.
Okay, public rights of way.
Well,
Well, I haven't got anything. I walked around them last week and the week before, I think, and I will probably walk around it tomorrow if it doesn't rain. I just follow her.
It'll be a fine day to follow that.
yes.
Bugger. Open spaces, David.
Nothing to report.
Good, thank you. Cemetery and churchyard. Apart from our closed session later, is there anything to?
Any news on the wall being repaired? A question I always ask.
You keep asking it. No, it needs to be cleared, and I did say that I would give a hand. But
All right, well, post-Christmas we have to get back to that with the spring coming. Village Hall Management Committee, George, as our member of the committee.
I have been proposed to be a member, but because the Village Hall Committee wasn't quorate when they met, they weren't able to call me on.
The position that we have taken in our discussion is it's not for them to co-opt you because you've been nominated by us. You're our nominee.
exactly,
Okay,
yes,
well.
yes. There's no question. You are our representative on the committee. They elect 3 members.
Yes.
The rest are part of the committee, but they have chairman, secretary. Yes.
So what?
So you are.
Whatever their situation, I haven't actually been
You
to
are
a
actually a
meeting
member.
yet because it was the AGM.
It was the AGM,
and
yes.
At which point that Nigel Tom resigned as chair, and I think that's
Sadly.
much to the surprise of the 2 other people that were on the committee at the time.
Indeed.
And the next
Concern.
meeting's in January, so until the next meeting, I can't really
Indeed.
comment on anything.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next full council meeting is second Tuesday of January. Items for information. If I start off very quickly, the Ashford branch of Calc, I believe you all had the minutes. The Calc AGM I attended a few Saturdays ago. I've written a note on it, and because it's getting late, I won't go through any of that, and I will copy it out to you. I know you're all pleased to hear that. Circulate Calc AGM note. The only thing I would say is that we heard from the Police and Crime Commissioner. Very impressive. I thought when Anne Barnes came to the first one, before she got into various grief, she was good. This one was considerably better. Sharp, on the ball, answered questions for an hour, answered most of them. I mean, the worst he did was say, it's just one that's not for me, I can't tell you. But on the whole, youngish fellow, very good. I would say anyone in the room was impressed. And it's all in the note. The civil servant was, you'll see the note. I am asked occasionally by Nicholas Hurst for a meeting, and I don't mean to sort of keep away from him, but I did think that at least you ought to know if I do meet him in advance that may happen, and we'll see what he has on his mind. He does want to put some things to me, I think. Last time I bumped into him in the street in Tenterden, and he was saying that he was still looking for a meeting.
He's not looking to have a SID posted yet.
So it could be. Yeah, well, he's got those red ones. I mean, the first thing that we have done so far is that he was urging that I put a report into Outlook on Oxney. You've seen the one I did last time, of course, and I'm hoping that suited. It was a bit longer probably than it needs to be in future. But
no, he was pleased.
He was pleased. In fact, he congratulated
me,
Yvonne, for doing it.
Right. Ghostwriter of the year.
Ghostwriter of the year, yes. No, that's me.
Yes.
Okay, the last item on our...
Any other items for information? Can I just mention
very
quickly some good news from rural Kent have successfully applied for a grant for their coffee caravan project, which is something that Kathy Bogdan has been working on for 6 months now. And it's something that she came across in East Anglia and hopes to replicate in Kent. They private consortium they put in, they've got the funding for it. And that's basically, it's not it's a caravan, it's more a minibus, and it comes to rural communities, and when the weather's fine, sets up, chairs and the idea there is to have a sort of focal point for information for people who can't readily get into towns, who can't readily get into the libraries. One example, which is very small, I just thought epitomised it. They were somewhere, where was it? Somewhere sort of on a channel. Anyhow, there was some situation where it was quite nice, and they actually set up as part of sort of the village fake open day, and they saw a lady on the edge of the village green who was looking very interested but didn't come towards them, so they went over there and they said, is there any need of help? She said, well, actually I'm a carer, and I didn't really want to come in and disturb you or what have you, but I was wondering, do you have any information on smoke alarms? Because the person I'm looking after really is suffering a little bit from dementia and getting absent-minded and chip pan boiled over, and they're very small things like that. But the idea is that we use this, and I'm going to try and put Wittersham forward as somewhere that's welcoming and friendly, and we can try it out there. But I think that's there's no limit on the information there, but there seems to be great interest in that, and we've got somebody to sponsor that for 3 years with everything that goes with it. So there you go, good news.
Good, thank you. David?
Nothing from me.
Sue?
No.
George?
No, thank you.
Clark?
No.
Okay. So the last thing is, can we resolve, are we ready to resolve by the nature of the sensitivity of the next items to exclude the public, the proposed cemetery extension and the Calton Ward stroke recognition? Proposed, seconded?
Yeah.
Everyone in favour? Okay. So we're now going to close the session. Feel free to take a mince, of course. Feel free to take a mince pie or some crisps.
Mind the lead.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
Thank you very much for coming and for staying to the bitter end, however bitter you found it. We do have a vacancy for a councillor.
Just let me know. Good night, Miriam.
Folks.
Good night.
Yeah,
Thanks, Al.